All right, the previous chapters we've been going through. We're in Isaiah 32. In the previous chapters, we've been talking about being God-centered, and how that Judah failed at centering themselves around God, around the king that we read of in Isaiah chapter 6, around the king, that same king that we read of in chapter 32 in the beginning verses, and how Judah failed to do that. Who did they center themselves around? Well, they centered themselves in the instance of chapter 32 around the help of Egypt, or the help of human institutions. And so we've been talking about that, keeping that our focus is being God-centered. And as we finish up chapter 32 with verses 19 and 20 and go into chapter 33, I want to get maybe practical with it. Look at how, and not that we haven't been practical, been listing things, how we can practice, put to use what we are reading of in Isaiah, and taking the lessons of Judah and their failures to inform how we ought to conduct ourselves. We're really going to drill down on the practical part in chapter 33. So I want to begin by asking, what does stability look like? What does stability in the home look like? What does stability as an individual look like? What does it look like as a nation? What do we look for when we look for stability? Consistency.
It's kind of consistency too, but justice.
Justice. How does the world view stability? Like, how, if you look at a family, how does the world view a family and judge that, oh, that's a stable? There's stability there. Lots of money. Right? Absolutely. The world fears collapse in many regards, and one of the things I want to get through our heads this evening, or to focus on this evening, is there's a lot to be anxious about from purely physical standpoints, right? There's a lot to be anxious about. The world is an anxious place because they have not centered themselves around God. And I just think about, for instance, just taking this because it's fresh on our minds, the government shutdown. Is this not something that happens all the time? Was this the first government shutdown we've encountered? No, feels like every year, right? And what is the media works us up into a frenzy, and like the world's going to end, right? And this past one, the flights, we can't pay our air traffic controllers, and I'd be a little bit worried if I was an air traffic controller, maybe, but would I have a fit of anxiety if I was centered around God? No, I know God's taking care of me. God's going to take care of me. We had a lot of people worried about the SNAP benefits, about food stamps and things like that. God's going to take care of you, right? Especially if you're a member of the Lord's church, nobody's going to let you go hungry, right? If we're centered around God, maybe we understand that. And we might understand that being anxious over these things, losing our minds over these things, is not something we ought to do. Because if we are centered around God, and we're going to see Judah was centered around the help of man, help of man's institutions, and these are man's institutions that people have all this anxiety about. Is it not? This is something man put into place that a lot of people have just built themselves. They depend on it, rather, in some cases, rather than depending on God. And there are things I get anxious about, right? There are things you probably get anxious about. The Islam, the spread of socialism among those in power right now, that's worrying to me personally. Am I going to have a fit of anxiety about it? No, I'm not going to do that. And so these are human devices. They're not God's design. And if we build our dependence on things of this world, when they inevitably collapse, we're going to find ourselves in panic. And so we're going to contrast a lot of things this evening. We're going to contrast prayer with panic, for one thing. If we center ourselves around God, that's going to be prayer. These things that we center ourselves, depend on, inevitably collapse, that's going to lead to panic. And so as unstable as we believe things to be today, it does not hold a candle to what the world was like in Judah's day, in Isaiah's day, rather. Around 701 BC, which is when this is occurring, Assyria is under Sennacherib, and they are just devastating the known world at that time. It's not just that immediate area. It's just the entire known world was being devastated, taken over by the conquests of Assyria. And Judah's panic at that time over economic and political collapse, we can find ourselves having that same kind of panic today, but it is about 10 times worse, I would say, than anything we're facing today. So how do we grab hold of stability today in an increasingly unstable world? Well, Isaiah provides the answer in chapter 33, but we never finished 19 and 20. I want to read that real quick. If someone could read Isaiah chapter 32 and verses 19 and 20.
It will hail when the forest falls, and the city will be utterly laid low. Happy are you who sow beside all waters, who let the feet of the ox and donkey range free.
All right, thank you very much. So we have the wilderness, the forest, man's pride falling in verse 19, but the faithful, we find there's a contrast there. One, we have collapse, and then on the other hand, in verse 20, the faithful just keep sowing, sowing beside still waters. And so true peace, true fruitfulness remain only in a life centered around God. It's not in the wilderness. It is only by those still waters that God provides, as mentioned in verse 20 there. So in chapter 33, the scene shifts from this description to something else. And then Judah faces the destroyer we're about to read of, that being Assyria. And we could take Assyria to represent the human powers, and the futility of trusting in those powers. We will see that God's people cry out for grace and deliverance in chapter 33. And then we see that also there's a focal shift from false peace to faithful dependence, from self-reliance to shown reverence in chapter 33. And so as we go through chapter 33 here, how do we make sure we're not in the wilderness, is in verse 32:19, but we are those sowing beside all waters. How do we make sure that we are centered, we stay centered no matter the circumstance? We'll see in verse 6, for instance, what that looks like. Let's go ahead and read that. Verse 6, we'll come back to verse 1. And wisdom and knowledge shall be the stability of thy times and strength of salvation. The fear of the Lord is his treasure. So you can lose your earthly freedom. You can lose your earthly convenience in many ways. Convenience, comfort. You can lose all those things. You know what you can't have taken from you is those two things, wisdom and knowledge. That's always going to be there. And that is what brings peace, if we're looking at verse 6. We'll look at that later. But first of all, verse 1 of Isaiah 33. Woe to thee that spoilest, and thou wast not spoiled, and dealest treacherously, and they dealt not treacherously with thee. When thou shalt cease to spoil, thou shalt be spoiled. And when thou shalt make an end to deal treacherously, they shall deal treacherously with thee. And so Assyria here is the nation in the immediate context of Isaiah. But we have a broader principle here, and that being that every oppressor that rises without God, every man that rises in his own pride is going to face God's judgment. He's going to face collapse. We read in Proverbs 16 and verse 18. Proverbs 16, verse 18, pride goeth before destruction, and a haughty spirit before a fall. So God allows the proud to rise up in this life. We see it happen all around us. But their fall is always certain. And we see Assyria here. We see other self-centered empires, movements, individuals. Those proud people are not going to last. They're going to eventually collapse under the weight of their own arrogance. And so God here, through Isaiah, is speaking of a time where justice is coming for these people. And God's justice operates on his timing. It's not on ours. For instance, when he says, when thou shalt cease to deal treacherously, they shall deal treacherously with thee. So they have dealt unjustly with the world around them. They are going to face justice according to verse 1. Should have hit that earlier. So man's power will end. And so, yep. So trust in God we find. Just think, if you were putting your trust, if you were Assyria at that time, and you had placed your trust in the might of their military and the ever expanding empire of that day, what would you feel like when Babylon came knocking at the door several years later? That's going to be panic, right? The trust in God brings peace, and it does not bring panic. Any comments or questions?
As we've talked about the value of this study, the value of going through the history here and seeing the wisdom and seeing the sovereignty of God is extremely comforting.
Mm-hmm.
And at least personally, I think sometimes it's like when you say, I'm not stressed,
Mm-hmm.
but you are stressed, but you're trying to, you shouldn't be stressed, but you are.
Right.
Sometimes I think we don't realize how much panic potentially we are experiencing emotionally and mentally because of variables of this life. But it's getting back to obviously to his word and seeing his sovereignty, his power, his wisdom, that you then all of a sudden have that relief and you realize, you know what, I was actually panicking
Right.
a little. I
Yep.
need to calm down a little. So this is, again, just the value of class. So
Absolutely. Yeah, and we'll talk about, I think later on, so I can never remember where I placed this stuff, but we can be prayerful and thankful right now for what we have. There's some that will look to God, but only when things go south, right? That's called panicking. That's I'm going to God right now because I'm panicking. How do we keep from getting there though? And that's through prayer. Yes, sir.
A lot of us here remember 1989 wall
Mm-hmm.
and we're kind of going across our eyebrows and thinking, wow, we finally arrived as a world.
Mm-hmm.
And I think as we get older, we trust in the world, we get disappointed.
Oh, right.
That disappoint you.
Yes. Consistency. Yeah. Yeah. Go ahead.
I think like whenever I know for me, I have to really whenever there's something really big going on, I have to always
Yes, absolutely.
It is really easy to get really stressed and down and it's what he wants us to do. We cast our cares on him, but there's a fine line, and so it's like I have to make sure to consciously and intentionally.
Mhm. Yeah. Amen. Yes, because we will get to this point, but I'll go ahead and go there. Exercising gratitude constantly actually reminds you how dependent you are on God. And if you're not constantly reminding yourself how dependent you are on God, when things go south, that's when panic sets in because you're no longer you haven't fostered this mindset of I have what I have because of God. I am blessed right now because of God. So when you lose it, what happens? Panic. Panic is what happens.
But contentment is what keeps the constant.
Mm-hmm.
Nerves, whatever. That you have to be content when you have. You have to be content when you don't have.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
Yeah.
As long as you keep that in mind, you never really stress.
Yep. Goes back to our lesson in chapter 32, complacency versus contentment. Godliness with contentment is great gain. Very good point. So we have the Assyria, for one, just the panic that would set in because they were not God-centered, and they have bought into something that we still are being sold today. The world sells us a bill of goods constantly, and they sell themselves as, for instance, political power being our savior. Just look at just a review, chapter 30, verses 1 through 3. Woe to the rebellious children, saith the Lord, that take counsel, but not of me, and that cover with a covering, but not of my spirit, that they may add sin to sin, that go down to Egypt, and have not asked at my mouth to strengthen themselves in the strength of Pharaoh, and to trust in the shadow of Egypt. Therefore shall the strength of Pharaoh be your shame, and the trust in the shadow of Egypt, your confusion. You put that, center themselves around and the devices of man. They've put their trust in Egypt, and I kind of feel they panic might have set in when Assyria started whipping on Egypt. And so we are sold a bill of goods that, first of all, political power can save you. So just as Judah's alliance with Egypt, can't we today believe that being in a certain group can save us? Being in a political party, being in a nation itself, is going to deliver us from evil. We can fall into that trap. We're being sold a bill of goods. We can be sold that the idea that financial systems provide stability, the economic systems, just we can have control and security, stability, as long as our finances are being controlled. and that might make us think back to 1929. What happened that year? The crash, the stock market crash. Systems that were supposed to manage risk actually were the things that caused the collapse. And so, one that put their trust in those systems back then, there was a panic that back then, wasn't there? So, an obsession with portfolios and secular employment, having our trust in that. We put our trust in that, that's going to lead to panic, isn't it? Being sold a bill of goods when we think we are stable based off of those things. We could probably list many other things: self-help, psychology. Just believe in yourself, but not in God. Believe in yourself, fostering this idea that as long as you believe in yourself, you can accomplish what you want, which doesn't do anybody any favors. We've got to place that dependence where? On God, right? We have to center ourselves around God. And in fact, that idea, we run the risk of, it's not a very humble thing to think, is it? That I believe in myself. That's not a very humble admission to make. So it doesn't foster humility and leans more toward just self-worship, doesn't it? So we can buy into these things. And all these things and more, you could probably come up with more examples. All these things promise control, but they deliver collapse. So having control here, any form of control that we think we have on this earth is just an illusion. We're buying into an illusion if we think we're in control. And that takes away from our acknowledging that we are dependent on God. So again, dependence on human systems produce fear. Faith in God produces peace. So we'll find, if we find ourselves trusting or placing trust in things that man has put into place, why would we later wonder what happened when those things collapse, right? We can so easily go from I'm doing just fine, I have a well-stocked 401k, I'm going to be coasting in just a few years when I retire. And 401k, has anybody seen their balance drop in their accounts before? 2009, yeah. So it doesn't sound very stable to me, does it? So we can't put our trust in those things. It doesn't bring peace. It produces panic. Any comments or questions before we go into verse 2?
Same old, yet we still have to say,
Mm-hmm.
we need to have confidence in our ability to do what we do. We have to have all this.
Yep.
So it's a tightrope we want.
Right. It's the principle of stewardship, right?
I have a yard, and I also have woods. So anything that goes in the woods is okay, but the woods and the yard are right next to each other.
Mm-hmm.
And one has to be paving, the other one I don't take care of that much.
Yeah. Absolutely. So, yep, there is there's stewardship involved there. There's our responsibility to keep those things and do what we can with what we have. There's that. But when it comes to getting anxious to the point of just losing our minds when we lose these things, we got to remember around whom we are to be centered, that being God. Wonder if somebody could read for us verse 2 of chapter 33.
O Lord, be gracious to us. We have waited for you. Be their arm every morning. Our salvation also in time.
All right. Thank you, brother. So this is the prayer. You could see the faithful remnant in Isaiah's day praying this prayer. And so after years of ignoring God, they are finally turning back to humility. Again, keeping in mind that this is taking place during a siege by Assyria. the siege of Jerusalem. The lesson to learn here is go to him constantly in prayer, and you're not likely going to find yourself in that state of panic. Faith thrives on daily dependence, not emergency appeals. And so we tend to forget when we're seemingly not in need that we need him for what it is that we have. This prayer that we're reading here acknowledges a few things. It recognizes, first of all, that grace, not merit, is the basis of salvation. You have a model of true penitence here. First, you have an acknowledgement of need. The ones praying this are acknowledging that they need something. They are, secondly, acknowledging that they are depending on God for these things. And then thirdly, they are declaring their trust in him for these things. And so waiting on God, sometimes that implies trust when things are uncertain. Let's look at Psalm 27. And verse 14. Wait on the Lord, be of good courage, and he shall strengthen thine heart. Wait, I say, on the Lord. It takes maturity to be able to say, I don't know how I'm going to get through this, but I know the Lord's going to make a way for me to get through it. It takes maturity to say that and to say it and mean it. So Jerusalem at this point is facing a situation and where they are surrounded, that maybe it's not the immediate day when Assyria has their army surrounding Jerusalem, but they're seeing city after city, nation after nation being taken over by Assyria. And no doubt, if they had not been centered around God, they would have felt a tremendous amount of anxiety. And we still face situations where we feel like the walls are closing in on us today. And so what do we read here? And what can we take? We can take that part of the prayer. Be thou their arm every morning, our salvation also in the time of trouble. So as opposed to the situation with Jeremiah, and we've talked about this verse as well previously. In Jeremiah chapter 17 and verse 5, thus saith the Lord, cursed be the man that trusteth in man and maketh flesh his arm, and whose heart departeth from the Lord. So as opposed to having flesh as his arm, God, be thou their arm every morning, he says there in chapter 33 and verse 2. His mercies, we know from Lamentations 3:22 through 23, his mercies are new every morning. He is a constant source of strength to them and a constant source of blessing and mercy to them. And so what can we take from this? Again, maintain that attitude of gratitude, that maintain a prayer life that is constantly thankful for what you have when times are good, and when times are easy, maintain that. And to remember every morning, it doesn't specify which kinds of mornings that he's their arm. It doesn't specify which kind of morning that he is their salvation. It's not just the easy times. Every morning, he is their arm. And then he's their salvation in the time of trouble. So that's something you've got to foster in yourself. Remember, every morning you're dependent on God. You're not dependent on anybody else. And not dependent on a government assistance program. You're not dependent on any other earthly organization. You are dependent on God. You're not dependent on your own merits. You're not dependent on your own effort. You are dependent on God. And when you lose these things, when you face the day of trouble, God is your salvation. Make sense to everybody? So we need to be cultivating a daily dependence on God, daily gratitude before crisis comes. It's not the time of crisis to turn running panicked to God. We need to foster this mindset before that happens. In verses 3 through 6, we read of the majesty of God. I wonder if somebody could read that for us, verses 3 through 6.
At the uproar of the army, the people flee, which rise up, nations scatter. The plunder of nations was harvested as by young locusts. Like a swarm of locusts, people pounce on them. The Lord is exalted, for he dwells on high. He will fill Zion with his justice and righteousness. He will be the sure foundation for your times, a rich store of salvation, and wisdom and knowledge. The fear of the Lord is the key to this treasure.
All right, thank you very much. So the word stability here, firmness, faithfulness, steadfastness. The word fear here, reverence, awe. This isn't terror. It's not fear as we think fear, but this is worshipful respect that we're reading of in this passage. One, like you would a king that loves you, is the kind of respect you have for him. Now, I spent some time on this because I was using the King James Version, and then I saw another version. There's two different translations. Does anybody have the ESV, the English Standard Version that they read from? Yeah. Can you give me that translation? Chapter 33, verse 6.
And he will be the stability of your times, abundance of salvation, wisdom and knowledge. Fear the Lord, Zion's strength.
All right. In the King James again, and wisdom and knowledge shall be the stability of thy time. So one version says, ESV says, he shall be the stability of thy time. And then the King James, wisdom and knowledge shall be the stability of your time. So I spent probably too much time looking at this, but they say the same thing. They just come at it from two different angles. The King James focus would be the qualities that God provides, that is wisdom, knowledge, and reverence. Those are what establish stability. The ESV's focus is the person of God himself is the source of that stability, and he bestows those qualities, the wisdom, knowledge, and reverence. He bestows those on his people. So they kind of you arrive at the same point in two different ways, if that makes sense. So both readings here agree that stability is of divine origin. It's not in me. It's not produced. It's not humanly produced. I didn't do it. I don't produce it. God does it. God has produced this stability. And then both of these versions read or seem to say that the fear of the Lord is a priceless possession for his people. So they both say the same thing. They arrived at it from two different angles. Does that make sense to everybody? And it's important to get that, to say that stability, God alone is the source of true stability. And human kingdoms they crumble every day. They have for centuries. God's throne is going to remain through all of it. His kingdom remains through all of it. So the fear of the Lord is his treasure. Reverence for God is the Christian's wealth, is what he's reading, what he's saying here. Any comments or questions?
I think you're putting it all together. I think one of the things that we're really looking for when the world looks to money and looks to worldly things, which are not stable, but they're actually looking for stability. And so, how is it that you can manage money in a way that is being a good steward? Or how is it that you can, enjoy the blessings of his creation in a way that is appropriate and so forth? Well, because the true pursuit is comfort, it is stability, it is treasure, and it's him as the source of those things versus thinking what it is that he's created is the source of those
Right.
things.
Absolutely. Kind of reminds you of idolatry, doesn't it? Worshiping the thing that God created in the first place and worshiping as it is him. Paganism. And we tend to do that. We are blessed with these things, and we tend to just, our entire lives revolve around them. And when we lose them, we lose our minds. We panic. It ought not to be that way. Yes. Mhm. Absolutely. Fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. The fear of the Lord is his treasure. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. What did we read just in verse 6? Wisdom and knowledge shall be the stability of thy times. Fear of the Lord brings stability. That's where it leads. Yes, sir. Right. Yeah.
Anything else you know is because it's not okay.
Right. Absolutely.
So, do you think?
Yeah. Absolutely. Ecclesiastes, fear God, keep his commandments. That's the all of man, right? So the application, the real test of faith is stability under pressure. Wisdom and peace don't come from us controlling our surroundings, controlling our circumstances, because any control that we think we have over our circumstances is just an illusion. Any stability you think is in the stock market is an illusion. Any stability you think you have in your job is an illusion. But our dependence on God is truly, our fear of God is truly what brings stability to our lives. The verses 7 through 16 speak further on the collapse of earthly confidence. I want to go ahead and read that. Behold, their valiant ones shall cry without, the ambassadors of peace shall weep bitterly. The highways lie waste, the wayfaring man ceaseth. He hath broken the covenant, he hath despised the cities, he regardeth no man. The earth mourneth and languisheth. Lebanon is ashamed and hewn down. Sharon is like a wilderness, and Bashan and Carmel shake off their fruits. Now will I rise, saith the Lord. Now will I be exalted. Now will I lift up myself. Ye shall conceive chaff. Ye shall bring forth stubble. Your breath as fire shall devour you. And the people shall be as burnings of lime, and as thorns cut up shall they be burned in the fire. Hear ye that are afar off what I have done, and ye that are near acknowledge my might. The sinners in Zion be afraid. Fearfulness has surprised the hypocrites. Who among us shall dwell with the devouring fire? Who among us shall dwell with everlasting burnings? There's the question: who can dwell in all this chaos and get out alive? Who can do it? Answer is in verse 15. He that walketh righteously and speaketh uprightly, he that despiseth the gain of oppressions, that shaketh his hands from holding of bribes, that stoppeth his ears from hearing of blood, and shutteth his eyes from seeing evil. He shall dwell on high. His place of defense shall be the munitions of rocks. Bread shall be given him. His waters shall be sure. So we have the vision of the king. Fix your eyes on that king. Let's pick up here next Wednesday. I know that was the second bell when we didn't hear the first one. So we'll talk about the vision of the king, the fear we'll summarize it as being in a state of fear and anxiety, coming out of that and coming into a state of faith. That's something very important. Thank you all for your attention.